Welcome to our show. Today's show, we are very glad to have Ruby Amatula. She is a human rights activist and she has written extensively all around the world, both in the Western media and the media from the South. Uh, and she's working tirelessly in bridging the divide between the West and the East. Uh, so today's topic. Oh, thank you, Appa. Assalamu alaikum for.
Alaikum assalam. Mm.
So today's topic that we've decided that we want to talk about uh, uh, the rise of this multipluralism that we are standing right on the edge now. What really happened to U.S. the prime hegemon? So U.S. rise into a superpower to what has caused this multipolarity that we are seeing now. So we are going to understand the historical context, and also understand the what caused it really, and what is the implication of that causality in present day politics. So, Appa, so let us start with. We have seen that even in the 19th century,
Mm.
United States expanded. Their naval power expanded towards Japan, and they fought wars in the Philippines with the Spanish. So, when did the U.S. become a superpower? Is it in the 19th century? Think that
Superpower generally connotes to military strength,
right?
but America had different dimensions of becoming a superpower because the one dimension is that up to the first part of the 20th century, it was a moral voice for the suffering people of the world because both leaders, Woodrow Wilson in 1990s and 19 in the earlier part of the 20th century, and Roosevelt, FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, after 1933, both envisioned that America needs to be on the side of the struggling people because people all over the world were struggling against their colonial power. They were exploited and they were dominated, they are humiliated, and um, their human rights were violated. So Wilson and Wilson's follower was FDR. Both saw that America's national interest will be best served if they can help create a world which is free and in which the human rights of the people are upheld, and paramount of the human rights is self-determination. Self-determination means self-rule or democratic rule.
So this
So
happened.
that I'm coming to, and that they were addressing side by side with the military power. But America was not a military power before the First World War. The reason is that there was no major war they were trying to engage in, and
They
they
were the
were
pacifists. You said that they
isolationist
were
power, so they didn't need to spend a lot of money in military. There were only 275,000
soldiers.
military personnel at that time. So that's not a superpower thing. There are pockets of elites who use the military forces for, as you said, in Philippines, in other places, Hawaii, other places. But there is nothing comparable to Britain or France or other
But their
European powers.
involvement in First World
The
War.
reason they became superpower is that Wilson came to power on the promise. It was a campaign promise to the people that Wilson is not going to take America to Europe's war. That Europe was actually at that time. He came in 1912. That was the election, and he came to power 1913 January. And election campaign promise was that he's not going to take America to any war. So, But after coming to power, he was also going in that mode until like Lusitania was sink. It was a big ship, and then ocean liners were being um, uh, sunk by the U-tube operation of Germany,
U-boat.
U-boat. Uh, So, so American leaders realized at that time that Atlantic is not a defense barrier anymore, and they need to get involved in the First World War. That is the time Wilson thought that if American soldiers get involved and die in the war for to stop the war, that is not to save Europe. He
Save
openly
America.
said that.
Right.
That is to establish a new world order that will block any further future wars.
Are
So,
you referring to the League of Nations?
huh?
League
League
of
of, League of,
Nations.
so America entered the First World War, and what Wilson did is that he campaigned nationwide, saying these things that our goal is to establish a new world order based on rule of law and not might is right of the colonial policy. So, and we need volunteers. So 5 million Americans volunteered, and the industry was set up. That at that time the nation was very patriotic, and they saw that this cause is the right cause, that their cause and the world's peace cause. It's a cause for peace. That 5 million volunteers and the momentum it created, and Wilson deployed enormous number, I think about 3 million people in war, and plus enormous amount of military weaponry equipments and all these things to bring it to stop the war as fast as possible. Time was an element for him because it was very destructive war at that time. So Wilson first declared in Congress that his goal is not victory. His goal is peace. Peace without victory. That's he declared. This impressed the enemies like Germany and Germany's allies and all that. That America is a
Making
country
sense.
that is not, you know, vengeful or you know um, taking revenge after the war and all that. Whereas Europe was saying that after the war we are going to ask huge war reparation from Germany. But 14 points, 14 points I will come later. So then he said, then he entered the war on April 1917. January 1918, he came to the joint session of Congress to declare his 14 points. Actually, was hailed worldwide
Okay.
and overwhelmingly supported by the American people because this is a peace agenda, not a war agenda.
So for the first time, then America became a international, global player, not only with their might but with their thoughts.
With their thoughts and with their agenda, with their
Peace agenda, agenda for
yes,
peace.
values, democratic values, and all that. The 14 points is an interesting thing if you see. The first time in history, a powerful global power or powerful country is saying that all nations have equal rights as to their sovereignty, their territorial integrity, their security, and their trade to become prosperous. The big countries cannot rob the possibilities for smaller countries to trade and be prosperous. At that time, that was the might is right policy
Correct.
of the colonial era was actually hindrance for the smaller countries to become prosperous. So those things were part of the 14 points. The another interesting thing was part of the 14 points was that there would be an association of nations, and this idea was non-existence before. Association of Nations, which was known as League of Nations. All the nation states of the world, whoever want to join, will come and form an international organization, and that organization collectively will decide about global affairs. And America would be a law abiding member of the international community. That is the part of the spirit of 14 points. So that's why world likes it, that liked it and really
But
supported it.
still,
But Europe didn't like it. And European colonial power did not like this because they knew that this is the recipe of ending colonial rule in the world. Whenever you are saying that
so
human
it
rights,
so this so the impact, you feel that the impact was not that much after the war,
no,
after when
impact
Germany
was
ended,
coming.
because reparation, Germany,
No, no, there is an impact.
okay,
Countless people in the world was inspired and motivated to fight against their colonial ruler because they knew that America would be on
by
their
their side,
side
okay.
in their struggle for freedom.
Hmm.
That was an enormous force. You have to go back in history to understand the papers and the media, what the press, what they
But ultimately,
expressed in
Second
that.
World War happened.
The
So,
first,
but
but the thing is that his 14 points was rejected by the Republican Party. He was a Democrat,
okay,
Democratic Party. Republican Party rejected, and unfortunately, Republican Party was majority in both houses of Congress. And if they reject that, that foreign policy will not be in effect. 1919 Versailles Treaty was signed by the European powers, and that is the reason why the Second World War happened.
because
And
of the reparation.
historians are almost unanimous that 1919 Versailles Treaty and posing imposing bad breaking reparation charges on Germany, and Germany was devastated. And from the ashes of the defeat of the war, Hitler rose to power. So, to make it short, that America became a superpower by that time, but also a moral voice for the world. So that combined gave America an enormous soft power and enormous military power, both.
Okay,
Even then, America decided not to get involved in the war. Again, 1933, Roosevelt came into power. Roosevelt came into power because 1929 there was stock market crash, and at that time the president was a Wall Street man. Herbert Hoover was a billionaire, and under him the stock market crash, and then there was a Great Depression in the early 1930s. And Roosevelt declared that he's going to actually declare war on the elites because elites have caused that depression. Elites have caused the stock market crash because they influence the government
did
of
he
the all the
articulate?
bad policies
Did he
of the
articulate this?
huh?
Did he
He
articulate?
articulated in Madison Square Garden. He gave a speech that he's going to fight against the elites
Okay,
and rescue the country. That and people trusted him, and he did rescue the country. And this is the first time he actually practiced a socialistic capitalism. Social security came into existence under his time, and a lot of other things that inspired people. And America under New Deal, and America again regained its strength. But then the world order, Second World War started in 1939. Again, America was reluctant. But 1941, the Pearl Harbor took place, and that compelled America to get involved in the war again. So this time, Roosevelt said that after the after the end of the war, Wilson's 14 points and more refinements will be implemented, and United Nations will be that global association that Wilson was talking about. So up to Roosevelt, up to Roosevelt, moral power and military power, both ways, America was the leader of the country.
But he,
Of the
he
war.
he didn't see the end. I mean, who implemented the dream? Because Eisenhower was uh,
He
he
laid
was
down. Eisenhower was not the next president. It was Truman was the
Truman.
next president.
Okay.
His vice president because became the after his death became the president. But his agenda carried on by George Marshall, his defense
The Marshall
secretary,
Plan, the famous
the
Marshall
Marshall
Plan.
Plan, and the Marshall Plan. The gist of the Marshall Plan, or the spirit of the Marshall Plan, was that again anti-war, pro-people agenda. This was the agenda: pro-people, anti-war agenda. They figured out the reason war happens is what Woodrow Wilson said: when human rights are violated in a massive scale, that's the root reason of war, all wars in history. And their goal was that human rights has to be established and all people has to be brought to a, a singular platform of freedom and
Not
self-rule
only for their country, for US, but for all countries.
for the world, because Wilson declared that self-rule or self-determination is a human right, and so therefore it should belong to humanity. All people should have it. So both of their agenda was that they are going to fight against the colonial rule and they are going to promote democracy and
So
freedom.
during Truman's time, after the war,
Hmm.
so what happened? I mean, America
Truman,
rose in power in their superpower. I mean, now they have more, I guess, muscle
now
power.
Marshall Plan continued because that was the project that was undertaken before his time, before Truman's time.
Right.
But Truman reversed whatever the Roosevelt was
Oh, okay.
and Wilson was seeing. He didn't totally, he could not reverse everything. United Nations and Declaration, Universal Declaration of Human Rights and all
Oh,
those things.
already they were.
He did not, he could not do that. But what he did is that he supported colonial rule in China, of French colonial rule in Indochina.
And also they played a role in terms of ending the colonial rule. I think one of the
Yes,
condition that
yes,
Second World War US got into
yes,
is that I mean the England had to agree that
right.
they have to end their colonial rule. So that
That
was one of
was
the conditions.
that was in 1941, the Atlantic Charter that Britain had to sign for in order to get help from the United States in the war.
Right. But during that time
So
also we see that Israel coming into Palestine. So how did this two different kind of thing happened? And
neither Wilson nor FDR supported partition of Palestine and creation of Israel in Palestine, because they were going by the wisdom of the King Crane Commission that was sent to Middle East to find out. Uh, Wilson sent this commission in 1919 to
okay.
find out the will of the people, what they want, whether they want the British mandate and French mandate or they want self-rule.
So
So there was
this was
extensive survey
okay.
of the King Crane Commission, and the report came out as this. First, it overwhelmingly the Arabs of the entire region
Okay.
wanted Western
But so
style,
my question is like
no,
how
Western
did
style democracy,
right? Okay.
Western style democracy, they also warned that if
Oh,
Israel is created in
so it's
Palestine,
been
there
it's
is
been
going to be
100 years,
yes.
but the Arabs, I mean, dream has
But
not.
100 years ago, Arabs said they want Western style
Okay, let's
democracy.
not go there. So it's kind of
Yes,
uh,
that was
sad.
vandalized, that
Right,
was
fine.
ruined.
So, in a simple way, that you're saying that the
So that is the
president.
advice. That are the
But
advice
then, how
that
come it happened? How
Roosevelt
come we
and
have the
George
Balfour,
Marshall.
but we have the Balfour Declaration after First
Yes,
World, and then after the Second World War,
after
we
the
see
Second World War,
the
these
migration.
thinking leaders took that advice and saw that Israel is not establishing Israel is not going to be a good idea. But Truman was threatened by the election. In the election where he was supposed to be he would lose the election. At that time, the influential Zionists told him that
Convinced him.
they are
Okay,
going to work for him and make sure he will win, but he has to partition Palestine and uh,
so
and
that's
and
that's when the
and
Zionist
and
got in to the
and
mainstream.
Zionist and his most of his cabinet disagreed with him,
Okay,
did not like
so
the
which
idea.
means that U.S. was consistently against colonial power.
Right.
You said that at that point in time.
1941, the Atlantic Charter actually is a decolonization policy.
Okay. So then we see after the Second World War, now there's a new player, new
Hmm.
superpower at
Hmm.
play,
Hmm.
the Russia and the Cold War era.
Cold War started in 1949 when Soviet Union became the other
Correct.
nuclear
So,
power.
the US soft power, what happened during that Cold War period? So,
The
US could retain its
Cold War,
soft power.
the height of the Cold War actually is when Russia started, the Soviet Union started rapid expansion in Europe, in Czechoslovakia and all those places. And that was the time that where diplomacy was completely abandoned and militarism was
Okay.
taken up
That's
by
one
the
story. But in Europe, also we see that this welfare state system took over. And from the Scandinavian countries to France, Germany, everyone adopted. And therefore, the quality of life in continental Europe and also the NHS in UK, it went up dramatically. The
Hmm.
poverty and the quality of life. I mean, so that also happened, and I
Right.
think the Marshall Plan did help that,
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
so I would
Marshall
assume,
Marshall Plan is considered a diplomatic feat
right.
of the 20th century,
So I would assume that the soft power in continental Europe
and
was
that was
high.
entirely based on soft power and constructive engagement.
Correct. And you're saying that the the sad part was that uh, the US lost its way in this conversation with the USSR. I mean
Yes,
that so
yes.
there was
Roosevelt had a plan that he is going to engage with Soviet Union, and he thought that socialism, communism came as a reaction to the massive exploitation, enormous exploitation during the Industrial Revolution, and he thought that West had a role to play in that,
wow, okay.
in controlling, not controlling the
So we
elites.
see this sort of pendulum thing.
Yes,
So the pro people
pro
and
people and pro elite.
elite.
Hmm.
So that is the
Pro
sort of the
elite, yes,
other, because then we see that even after Second World War, and you have this America. I mean, finding all communists, it was scared about the communist rule in unthinkably his hysteria. They had this hysteria on, but then we see again Kennedy again comes and starts talking, the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was resolved because Kennedy decided to talk to the
Kennedy.
counterpart.
Kennedy is misunderstood president. He came as a naive and most young president, but in 2 3 years, particularly after Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy became a statesman. So Kennedy cut down on the military spending. Kennedy was planning to engage constructively with the Soviet Union and China and bringing Vietnam War to stop by constructive engagement, not militarily. And Kennedy, um,
Not stop. I mean,
to stop
to stop. Okay.
Vietnam War,
Right.
because he realized that Vietnam War was avoidable. It was it was not it was not avoided because the elites actually caused the war. Elites actually suggested the government not to engage with communist leaders. No dialogue with the communist leaders
Okay.
at that time. But
But
Kennedy decided to have a dialogue with the
that was
communist
the
leaders.
same time when we see the civil rights movements coming up.
Yes.
So this is always a seesaw kind of a thing. The elite comes in, and then the people response. So
Yes,
is
but
that the story?
Kennedy was a vehement. Kennedy's support for the civil rights was crucial. I mean, his standing, his policy made civil rights movement succeed.
So
He is the most forceful factor or force, I would say,
so
in
another
that.
historic milestone was the end of communism, the Berlin Wall.
Mhm.
So how did that come about?
Okay, so what happened is that in Vietnam, 60,000 Americans were killed and 3 million Southeast Asians were killed. And American people, common people was becoming aware of the situation. After the Tet offensive in 1968, the American public realized that American government lied to them and took the country to a war that was avoidable. Ho Chi Minh did not want war. Ho Chi Minh wanted to work with the United States as an ally. It was an ally during the Second World War. It was fighting against Japan side by side with America.
Right.
So it could have been an ally. It was trying to be an ally, but it was rejected by the elites that it is a communist leader. We are not going to have a dialogue or constructive engagement. Interestingly, I want to bring a one point. There was a State Department official at that time, and he was very knowledgeable about the Southeast Asia affair. And he suggested that it will be a win-win strategy if $500 million is given to Ho Chi Minh for the rebuilding of Vietnam, and compel or ask France to get out of Vietnam. It was very easy to be
So
easy
this
to
was
do.
before
At
the
that
start of
time,
the war.
it was not a difficult job for America. If America would have said to France, "You please get out of,"
This is
uh,
after Second World War.
after Second World War, it is I'm talking about early 1950s. It would have come out of that, and um, and there would not be Vietnam War, and Vietnam would have been one of the strongest ally at the foot of the
Chinese.
in the region next to China and close to Soviet Union. Vietnam would have been a strong ally, but
Mm.
everything was lost for short-sightedness and the self-centeredness of the elites.
So,
It
but
was an elite-driven policy. The Vietnam was an elite-driven policy. So after 60,000 American people died, I'm coming to that question.
Berlin War, how
And
did it?
American people was rising up, and they were on the streets continuously protesting. Late 1960s and early 1970s, this protest against Washington and demanding Washington that you stop the reckless militarism, you stop the arms race, the nuclear arms race, and dialogue with the communist bloc, constructively engage. That was the message of the people, of the American people.
Okay.
Washington, after Nixon's time, changed. made a U-turn. So the China policy took place in 1972 and onward, 70s and early 80s. China policy was a breathtaking diplomatic policy, and it was initiated by Washington. So great breakthroughs, positive breakthroughs could be possible from America, from
I
American
understand, but
government
still I
can
don't
take that.
understand that
But
fall of
after
Berlin Wall. Why would that happen? Because the way I
I'm
look at
coming,
it, after
I'm coming to that.
Vietnam War, American software power is decreasing because America is active everywhere.
There are a
South
lot of
America,
things
right?
behind it, but the
But soft power,
one major trend
right?
about why Berlin Wall came down, is one is that uh,
The Soviet Union imploded. I
no,
guess that's is
Soviet
that
Union was competing with the United States militarily, and by doing so, it was actually economically becoming bankrupt country. But outside world never knew because it's a very closed door
curtain.
curtain country, and the outside world did not realize it that it was actually a house of cards that is going to fall. They are competing militarily. They are strengthening their elites. It was elite government.
Right.
The
Same problem.
Kremlin is
Same
an
problem.
elite government, not a people government.
So same problem.
The same problem.
Right.
So what happened is that the when that message came, when the China policy took, then Soviet Union became interested to engage with
US.
America constructively, because America is engaged with the China, and so they are also wanted to. America engaged with Soviet Union through detente, and detente was a wonderful diplomatic dialogue and diplomacy, smart diplomacy.
Okay.
So both China policy in the 70s and early 80s and detente 80s and early 90s brought the Cold War to end in
So
1989,
now,
and Berlin Wall
so
ended.
Berlin Wall falls,
ended.
and now
But
US
the
is the
positive,
but
the one interesting thing we need to see is that positive initiative was taken. Diplomacy was given a priority or a momentum by the American government. So it's a very decisive force in the world when it uses its diplomacy and
and it
soft
makes
power.
sense also.
Pardon?
It makes sense also. Only the elites can think that this would be a great disaster of not talking.
Yes.
So Berlin Wall falls.
Uh,
Now US is the sole superpower. And so what happened to its soft power? Hard power, we all know that hard
the
power, there was
elites stepped back because military spending was cut down, budget was cut down,
no, I mean, after,
nuclear freeze. Yes,
okay.
after the Cold War ended, there was nuclear freeze. There was
So who led this?
the detente dialogue, the detente. There were a succession of talk where actually in one meeting, in one conference, they wanted to eliminate all
Nuclear power.
nuclear uh, weapon.
Okay.
But it was Reagan, and under the influence of the elites, who said no, not all, but we cannot trust the other side that much. What if they retain and we demolished all our nuclear weapon? But
Okay.
anyway, whatever is the case.
So
So
what happened during the era of sole superpower? So that started, and
the Cold War stopped,
stopped.
and America became the superpower, unquestionable superpower. That
So what happened to the soft power?
the
We know
soft
about the hard
power,
power.
yes. So the elites thought that they have to find something. So
Okay.
they found something.
Which is
You have to find a common enemy. Before, the common enemy was communism. So since communism is gone, I have to find a common enemy again, because communism is no longer the enemy. Now, this time they found the Muslim world. The Muslims are terrorists. They are a common threat. And 9/11 came, and it was a statement of to help. At me, actually, 9/11 served the opportunity to the elites in a silver platter.
Right.
The thing that they were trying to say in late 1990s, and American people were convinced after 9/11 that there is a problem with the Muslim world about terrorism, extremism, and West hating and all that. But that's a pretext. That is not actually reality. That
So,
is the elites concocted narrative to vilify Muslim world, to demonize the Muslim world, but forgot why the radicalism or the resistance, violent resistance started. Why? This question was never extremist, and terrorism was introduced by Zionist groups like Haganah. Haganah was created in 1920. It says to protect Jewish people, but actually the agenda was to terrorize the Palestinians, to drive them away from Palestine.
they at one
So
point
then that was
blew up the
1920. But
hotel.
look at this one, like 1920s, 1930s, Irgun came into existence. That was even more fierce agenda of crushing Palestinians, terrorist agenda, killing innocent people, burning villages, occupying area after area, all terrorist work. But the Western media covered it up. Look at this one. So that was in 1920s and 30s, 40s. Zionist terrorism was going on. Who blew up the
hotel.
King David Hotel in 1946, and 90 people, British headquarters,
Exactly.
blew up?
Exactly.
Who did that? It was Zionist, the Irgun operatives. Actually, Begin was the head.
No, you
So the thing is that when PLO came into existence, you have to ask that in mid 60s, that was in 20s Communication Act.
okay.
With that act, it was actually a product, a law that came into existence after intense lobby for long time by the elites to capture media, American media, so that they can tell,
So what was the
bluff
essence
Americans.
of that telecommunication?
The aim was to bluff American public.
Or what was the act about?
The act eliminated the healthy rules and regulations that were in place with regard to the ownership of media. There were 1,500 outlets before that act. After the act, only 6 mega corporations controlled the entire American media.
Wow. Okay.
And today, American media is the most untrustworthy media.
So I guess the
If you want
conference.
to hear about the truth, you have to go to Al Jazeera or other
So
places.
what you're saying is this Telecommunication Act and the 9/11. So these two made the
And campaign finance, and some of the notorious campaign finance rules that came into Congress passed by taking the money from the Wall Street.
So
Is all elite agenda.
so do you feel
These
that
are all elite agenda.
do you feel that America losing soft power between the people and the elite,
Yes, people
it's
and the
moved down?
elites.
But
Yes,
what we are surprised to
the
see that
people are compelling Washington to
bow
become
down.
pro-people,
Exactly.
pro-freedom
So,
foreign policy.
but what we see that post 9/11, and you mentioned it, the Telecommunication Act and also
And campaign finance act.
So the convergence of three, what we see that's the last 25 years, a quarter
Last
century,
25
is
years,
nothing.
American government is
It's
a
it's
hostage.
it's just total elite.
Absolutely stranglehold of the American government.
The elite is
Elite
elite,
has
totally.
stranglehold.
So do you
In
see?
1956, let me tell you one thing. In 1956, let me see if I have the book handy.
Not necessarily,
Okay,
because we're the
it's
audience.
Power Elite. In 1956, a iconic scholar, actually, Columbia scholar. His name is C. Wright Mills. He wrote a book in 1956 at the height of the Cold War, and it's called The Power Elite. He exposed the working, the mechanisms of the elites. And that was a bestseller, and for decades it was a bestseller. But what he said is that the top people of Wall Street, top people of military, and senior influential politicians who are corrupt. Not all politicians are corrupt, but the corrupt politicians have interwoven interest. So they collude, and they collude to consolidate their collective power, to exert the power on the American government so that American government serve their interest,
The
not the
deep
interest
state,
of the
right?
people.
So, but what we see
That is the thing.
through that, but what we see is even after that,
Mm.
even after that, people rose and compelled the government to be more pro people. So we
Yes,
see that
yes.
in the height of Vietnam War
And
is going on,
that's why
right?
the China policy came into
Correct.
existence, the
But
detente
but
came.
surprisingly, what we see,
No, just a second. China policy and detente were actually a movement of the people. It's the people collective will that was actually the Zionist elites are on top of all the elites. So since it is the most powerful elite after the 1967 uh, Middle East war, then the Wall Street elites, the military elites, military industrial complex elites, I would say, and politicians all collude with the Zionist elite. So it's like the elite combination, an invincible
it
force.
worked.
And,
It worked in terms of quid pro quo. I mean, Zionist elites, I mean, did make a difference.
yes, there is another
So so,
another episode to be done for that.
but so what I'm saying is that is there any hope for the people of America to come
Of
back?
course, there is a hope. The hope comes from the people. American people have to
But
wake up.
how do you fight this telecommunication act? How do you fight this? After the war, human rights violation. How do you write penetration of the
It
Supreme
is the
Court?
younger generation politicians that are coming to Washington. They are the hope. They are going to tell the stories. Another thing is that social media is a democratic platform, and social media cannot be totally controlled as the
True,
media was controlled.
true.
So, this is one thing the elites could not really muster as of now. So the new generation, the educated students who are coming out of the colleges and universities, they are informed. So they are now really motivated to take part in and sustain puppet governments worldwide and stop the authoritarian government and and take initiatives, take agenda, massive agenda for democratic agenda and freedom agenda worldwide, as Wilson and FDR did. The young generations are
Need to
going
then,
back to
but I think basically
that mindset.
primarily they have to understand that the elite story of America. They have
Yes,
to understand who is behind the plutocrats.
as
Now,
I told
right?
you, that
So
these
that
are
is
the
one.
forces,
But
and they have enormous amount of money, and money for generations. It was accumulated. See, Piketty is a world famous economist, and he wrote a book, the capital in the 21st century, that elites would control. It's unparalleled disparity in human
Correct,
history,
correct. But I
because
want to come back to
no, it's because generations of elites have accumulated wealth, and now new generations have the money, enormous money, and the technology at their disposal. They are becoming almost invincible. Okay, only countervailing power is the people's power,
correct. And
and
they need
they
to understand that the story of the elites, and also I think they have to understand how the Zionist elite have corrupted the democratic system
absolutely,
thoroughly. So
absolutely,
that
no
is that,
question.
that if they identify that this is the case, then they can use the
They are
democratic system to their
the
advantage.
Palestinian genocide now is waking up American young
I
generation.
understand, but I don't think I don't see enough of what the Zionist elite does to the American political system. That I think I
Now, I
don't think
think
still.
Jewish people themselves are became annoyed, irritated by the Israeli policy. I
Okay.
think, I think increased number of Jewish people are really
But
separating
you mentioned
themselves.
something.
That is also a positive trend. It is a
Right, right.
positive trend.
So I mean, we don't have
A
any other
lot of positive trends are
are
also
also
coming.
coming. So we understand the people needs to take back their own what they've lost. Fine, but you also mentioned that we started the story from Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson,
Uh-huh.
and at that point in time, Woodrow Wilson was against the colonial forces. They felt
Yes,
self-determination. Do you
and
see?
also against the elites of his country.
Correct. So, do you feel that this self-determination and the democratic, you mentioned a little bit
Yes,
that like we're in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is in a transition right now, and so there's a fight to make it democratic. And so there are lots of geopolitical threats because we have a big brother neighbor also. So who doesn't feel that we need to have democratic institutions? So do you feel that US have anything to do with what should US do in terms of this Bangladesh political things? Because the thing is out there that the US created this revolution,
mhm,
that conspiracy theory is there.
right.
But do you feel that Bangladesh can help US, not like US helping
Of
Bangladesh?
course,
In what way?
Bangladesh is situated in a very critical geopolitical situation. It is in between. It is the connection between Asia and Southeast Asia. Its maritime connectivity can actually rightfully the the chief advisor said it, that it could be a hub, manufacturing hub of the world. It could be, and also that all the world global powers are interested in Bangladesh right now, and Bangladesh can play a critical role, a balancing act, smart diplomacy to use all global powers in getting its interests done, and
That conversation,
yes, and
right?
not drive any power out, but utilize them in a balancing act and serve its interest. Nepal did that between India and China, as
But
Nepal
how
did.
will it? How will this thing benefit US? I
How
mean,
America is going to benefit? Look, you go back to Iran. After the destruction of Iran, destruction of the
the democratic
nation
institution.
democracy, burgeoning democracy in Iran, America became a villain in the world. America became an evil force. America can, and many other things, policies America did that where America became a evil force, a villain in the world. And that didn't serve it at all, because when your soft power, moral voice is gone, you only rely on your military
Hard
force.
part.
And military involvements are all
So
counterproductive.
you feel
In
Bangladesh?
just look at this: Afghanistan. Iraq,
Correct. Correct. We
anywhere
all know.
in the
And
war on
Ukraine.
terror, Ukraine. Well, that's a different story, but I'm
Okay.
saying that 2 decade long war on terror is a counterproductive $14 trillion. 13 war later, America has achieved nothing but
Yes.
negative things. The positive things can be achieved if it can help Bangladesh become democratic. If America can be on the side of the people, it could have won Iran in 1953, Guatemala in 1954, Congo in 1960 and 73. It could have won Chile, and worldwide, countless people would be on the side of America. The soft power would be very strong, and American soft power
Hmm.
is insidious but phenomenal.
And
It's
and
it's a profound power. It is much. I mean, I see much more powerful than the military power.
so
Military ever could not achieve anything like this.
so
What soft power
strategically
can do.
speaking, I mean, we have in this multipolar world, one pole is China. If we say Russia, another pole, and the US is another pole, and everybody else is on the sideline. Now, America is uniquely placed that that's the only democratic nation. Russia cannot claim to be a democratic nation. China
Russia,
cannot.
Russia cannot claim, and Russia is not interested in promoting
Correct. Which
democracy.
means that,
Now,
which
China is
means,
not interested in promoting
correct.
democracy.
So to
China
be a
is
friend, if
in
US, therefore US has an opportunity to be a
opportunity.
friend
Yes,
of all the people of all the countries who are wanting self determination, who wants a better quality of life. So Bangladesh, as it's in a
Bangladesh,
transition,
Bangladesh can become
a poster child.
America's what is that lighting rod, because it could be a paradigm shift. It could really help it regain the moral voice that it has lost for so long.
Okay.
And I want to say this, that it's also beneficial for America's national interest, America's trade in Southeast Asia and Asia. If you democratize Bangladesh, the entire region will be democratized sooner or later. And that is the way you can get involved um, you can plan long term. It's the stability and sustainability of peace actually gives you a steady formula of getting engaged. And see, the thing is that short-sightedness and self-centeredness of the elites lost the sight that by putting puppet government, you destabilize the country, and you do not know what is going to happen tomorrow. But if you establish a democracy, and that democracy is thriving, that democracy is going to be always your ally, your staunch ally.
Okay. Let's stop at that. Thank you very much, Rubiappa. Thank you for staying with us. I guess we just saw it's a general theory of humanity. You empower people, you make them self-reliant, and you let them self-determine how where they want to proceed. And US was a guiding light for that for centuries because of their democratic system. So I think what we understood today, that again, if US starts experimenting or standing by the side of the people's aspiration to be self-determination, US can regain that soft power, and the world will be a better place for
Better place.
all of us. So in that good thought, let's end. Thank you, Appa. Thank you for staying with us.